cow farts in the
Right.
ozone layer.
Right.
What information can you give on that sort of thing?
Well, there's interesting rebuttals to that, and I have to think of his name at the moment. One of the top methane researchers in the world is right here in California, UC Davis. Hold on, I'm looking up his name. It's not coming to me off the top of my head. Frank Mitloehner. And he's spent his entire career basically rebutting this information that cow farts or cow burps actually are destroying the world. Basically, they just don't do a full accounting of it. So imagine the way that they count methane is they count it as emissions from cows. But what they don't do is take intakes into account. So they're only accounting for output. Yet we know cows eat grass, and grass is carbonaceous. Methane is carbonaceous. You have to account for the intake in methane, and not just the output of methane. And if you think about this, it's just common sense. Let's do the same thing with cow pee. If you looked at a cow and watched it peeing, if you were a vegan, you might conclude that cow pee is going to flood the world eventually, because they wouldn't account for the intake in water from grass and water. They would just account for the output of water, which is what they're doing with methane. So you have to account for the intake of carbon and the outtake of carbon, the emission of carbon. You can't just say, oh, their emissions are X. Well, what's the intake? And Frank Mitloehner's done much work on this. He calls it a flow gas. Methane is a flow gas when it's from cows. The problem with methane is when it's from the earth, when it comes from the earth, and it's like in fracking and things like that, and from oil refining. And then there's no intake of methane, there's only an output of methane. So we dig it from the soil and let it go into the air, and then that's when it causes warming. But when it's in a cycle of eating grass, the methane comes back down, the CO2 comes back down into the grass to make grass, and then cows eat it, and then they output methane. But it's in a cycle. It's a flow gas. There is no warming from it. There just couldn't be, because it's a cycle.
Yeah, but don't you know, Kerri, by eating meat, you're contributing to so much of, you're responsible for the polar bears having to swim more.
Yeah, there's some. One of the things that's interesting in history is that they like to omit the entire medieval warm period. And there was, during the Vikings, when the Vikings were on there exploring basically much of the world, they were in the warmest time we've ever been in, including today. There were no icebergs, no ice flows. The polar bears should have died off then, but why didn't they die off then? I don't know.
They mated with the grizzly bears.
They must have something saved them. I don't know what it was, but they should have all died off. It was so hot.
They're actually doing that now too. Now that there's been an increase in polar grizzlies.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. I don't want to run across one. Whew.
Oh yeah, because both polar bears and grizzly bears are both well known for their tempers.
Very much so.
So
yeah, I would not want to run across one of those, and I wouldn't want to run across any of those polar bears, grizzlies, or a hybrid.
Yeah, hybrid of them both. Although So yeah, I think it is something that it's vegans like to talk about that a lot, and they say, well, don't you know that all the grass that these animals are consuming, it's hurting the wildlife?
Yeah, I don't even know what they mean by that. I guess they mean the deforestation for um, cattle ranching, and that does happen. There is, some deforestation, and there has been in the past, but generally, you don't need to deforest for cows. We're actually planting trees where I live because it provides shade for the cows. It's called silvopasture, and you can get multiple types of products from the same land. So you can graze cows and, for instance, raise fruit, and you get shade from the fruit. You get the fruit that falls, the animals will eat, and it's just a symbiotic relationship. And there's no reason that cows need to be on deforested land. And if you go through where cows actually live and graze, there's usually a lot of trees there. It's not deforested. Sometimes it is, but there's no reason it needs to be.
But
It's better for the animals to be forested.
but Gary, don't you know that that humans are primates and all the other primates they don't eat meat. They just
Well,
they just eat leaves.
most primates actually do eat meat, which kind of destroys their argument. They don't eat a lot of meat, but they do eat meat. Jane Goodall considers chimpanzees omnivores, but there are. Last I checked, we actually evolved from them and diverged from them. So there's no reason to believe that we should eat what they eat when we're not them, and we evolved not to be them. I mean, we
Yeah.
aren't them. Why would we expect to do and eat what they do and eat when we aren't them and we evolved not to be them? Specifically, we evolved not to be them. So why
Yeah.
would we be them?
Well, yeah, I mean, the thing is like they don't take into consideration the fact that even like a reason why some of these primates they don't have a high um meat intake is not because they don't want to, it's just because many of them they're very lazy and sedentary and they don't really like going out to hunt.
Yeah, they're
Now,
just not good hunters. If they were better hunters, they'd eat more. There is I think it's a macaque in uh, where they grow palm, or where they have palm forests, and it's been found to be a voracious predator of rats, and it just chows them down. And they found that they were, because the monkeys also like the palm fruit, they were going to be killing the monkeys, and they did a cost basis on this of them eating the rats, and they eat so many rats that it's very cost effective for them to leave the monkeys there and let them eat the rats.
mhm,
Let them have their palm treats once in a while, their little palm fruits, as a reward for eating the rats.
mhm. Yeah, I know that they a lot of times they'll go after like small vermins together, and even then they'll eat insects all the time, in which I hear many vegans are against, eating bugs as well. Although they're trying to get people into eating them, sort of paradoxically as well.
Right. It seems like they're principally against, eating bugs, but not so much. They say that they are, but they're happy to kill them, just like most animals.